name is Wil, Director of Outreach at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, and welcome to day 2 of Application Week. Today, we're going to be focusing on telling your story, and more specifically, focused on the essays, short responses that kind of exist in the application, and the optional questions. So we're going to be doing a couple of different things here. So to cue us through the event, I'll start us off with a few high-level kind of takeaways. And these are going to be the ones, if you don't have enough time to watch, hopefully these are the themes that start to resonate. They're going to be similar throughout the week. But that's because the spirit across all of the sessions kind of does have a lot of resonance. The holistic review process. I completely feel, I 100% believe that that is the fundamental piece to help you understand how we look at the application and therefore how to put your best foot forward in the process. Then we'll talk about the essay, short responses, optional answers, and then definitely saving some time for tips, tricks, best practices, strategies, and then I'll be jumping into the live Q&A as well. You do have the upvote feature, so if there are questions that you see that are similar to yours, please feel free to upvote them. The more upvotes they get, the higher in the list they go. Sometimes if there's one question that's repeated multiple times, it gets buried. So upvoting is going to be the best way to make sure that something is catching either my attention or the attention of my teammates who are here supporting today's event. All right, so preface, and I do this every time because I think it's crucial that similar to any other advice out there, you don't have to take it. You don't need to kind of incorporate anything I say today to be successful in the process. And I will extend that beyond to advice you get from folks in your world, what you're reading online. Take everything with a grain of salt. Find the things that kind of resonate for you and make sense. Test them out, workshop them, incorporate that. If things don't feel right in the moment or you feel are kind of holding you back, put that in the back pocket, right? Find the things that help you continue forward movement in the process, and that's the best thing you can do. I'll also preface by saying some of the tips, best practices are kind of gleaned from over a decade of experience that I've had in admissions. So not necessarily always the formal view of Stanford Graduate School of Business, but these are things, perspectives, and shifts in how you might look at things that might be able to nudge you into a new track that helps you really kind of elevate, explore, and convey who you are. All right, so here's the too long, didn't watch. It's that spin on TLDR, too long, didn't read. Holistic review process. So how do we think about writing in the application? So first and foremost, I am not grading essays or responses. I will never admit or deny someone solely because of their essays. Rather, what am I able to learn about you through this process? Right? So slight nuance there that we'll continue to unpack throughout today's event. Sometimes there's a lot of, you're going to read things, you're going to see articles, even the profiles that we post online. And you start to triangulate and try to position yourself relative to them, throw them out the window. I know it's hard, but try your best not to judge where you're coming from, the story that you bring. Speak your truth. At the end of the day, if it's important to you, it's important to us. And if in doubt, tell me about a time when. Bring it back to those evidence pieces of the actions you've done. Tell me about the context and some of those details around that. What, how, why, so what? Those are the details that are going to be helpful to me in the admissions committee. And I'm kind of plugging them here, and I'll point to specific workshops throughout today's event that have specific exercises or frameworks to help you continue to explore some of the questions that we ask in the application more deeply and in a little bit more of an engaging way. Today, I will be speaking a little bit more than I'm going to be able to invite you into the practice of workshopping, but we definitely have resources already available. And so rather than providing the same type of service, I want to do my best to be able to provide you with something new, some fresh takes and learnings since the last time we did application week. All right, so holistic review process. We are taking a look at everything that you submit in order to get an idea of who you are and who that person is that's going to show up in our classroom and our community. So key takeaways here. There's no formulas, there's no equations. I'm not weighing one part of the application versus another. There are no algorithms. AI is not a part of this at all. And hopefully you'll see why. That same token, there are no benchmarks, there's no minimums or cutoffs. I can think of folks off the top of my head. If you looked only at numbers, you'd be like, oh, But as you take a look at the entirety of what they submit, you're like, yes, this makes total sense. So rather than hanging your hat on some of these single data points out there, really embrace and allow your full story to come to the forefront. Okay. And because of that, no one part of the application is more or less important than the other. I'm gonna say that again. No part of the application, including the essays, is more or less important than the other. I know that there can be a lot of stress and feel like there's additional pressure with the essays because that's what you have full control over in the moment, right? You took your test, you already did undergrad, work is work. Someone else is writing your letter of recommendation. Here's the piece that you have control over. And so how can we kind of shift the mindset? So rather than becoming a burden or something to dread, it can become an exercise that helps you beyond just the utility of the application process. And then context matters. Each one of you has walked a different path to get to where you are today. Even for all the folks who might be working in private equity or in tech or in government, even within those groups, all of you are doing different things. The schools you went to, how you were raised, the resources and opportunities available to each and every one of you is different. And so that's why context matters. The application is so meaty, including the essays and short responses, to give me some of those contextual pieces to help me understand what excellence in your context looks like and help me elevate that so that I can share it with the rest of committee. All right, so what do we look for? At a high level, how you think, how you lead, and how you see the world. Notice it's that how, it's those details versus the what, right? If you think about some of those what details, accomplishments, those are indicators of things that you've done. For folks who might be in consulting, things like sponsorship, that's a signal of some type of action, deliverable outcome that you took, that you did, right? So think of it that way and help me understand, what did you do underpinning this? Knowing that not everybody has opportunities like that. Not every workspace or lived experience has markers and signals. So just tell me about a time when. Bring us back to some of those experiences and examples. And then how you see the world. These are each industry, background, world, lived experience agnostic. You'll also get a sense that all of these kind of blur, and you can find evidence of each one of these in any part of the application. I actually got called out on this yesterday in one of our info sessions. Really great question about like how you see the world and how you think. Are those, how do you differentiate between the two? And the hard answer and the easy answer is we don't. Sometimes the way you see the world does kind of impact and influence how you think, and in turn, how you lead. And throughout the application process, we're able to unpack and kind of discern some of these layers that help kind of indicate and show us like how nuanced and multidimensional each and every one of you are. So don't feel like these have to be mutually exclusive. Many times they are layered and multifaceted, just like you are. Okay, so I have feelings. As an admissions nerd, I hear a lot of things. I see a lot of stuff out there. Some of it's helpful. Some of them have a nugget of truth, and some of it, So this is in particular is a space where these are my own kind of feelings, examples, and not necessarily reflective of the official standing of Stanford University. But I think it's important to at least have somebody challenge some of these notions. So first, I said this before, and I'll say it again. The essays are not more or less important than any part of the application. If anything, they are one part, kind of, if you're a visual thinker, they're one part of many that helps paint the picture of who you are, right? Just like in this image, there are necessarily some gaps in between. So if you think this way, how can you make sure that the image portrayed in each and any one of these parts is as crisp and clear as possible? I can learn about this person's arm across testing, activities, work history, education, letters of reference, and again, very direct metaphor and analogy for how we might learn about you could be through any part of the application. Okay, and part of it, this is my hot take, part of this, a lot of times I see stuff, articles out there, people publishing full-on books about, here's the essay that got me into blank. I've read a lot of applications, and thankfully the memory is still there. I actually do remember a fair amount of essays. I can't say that I remember all of them, but there are times where I will see one of these articles or pick up a book just because I think it's fun, and I'll see it and I'll be like, that's not what got you in, right? Again, we're never admitting someone solely because of an essay. We're never denying someone solely because of an essay. You could be admitted despite your essays, right? So really trying to step back from the pressure that we tend to put ourselves with the writing process. If anything, if I were to kind of embody this, it's not, here's the essay that got me in. It's more like, here's the essay I got in with, right? So just slight nuances there. So help us zoom out. Okay. Authenticity. This word gets thrown around so much. What is authenticity? Rather than trying to fit into a mold or how do you define it? I think at the baseline, who are you? Are you speaking from a place of your own experiences? Are you using the language and words and phrases that feel natural to who you are, where you come from, the way you engage with the world? When you're able to speak from that place of truth, that's where that authenticity comes from. So rather than thinking, does this feel genuine? Does this feel like I'm authentic? An analogy I have is sometimes it's intangible. And not that you have to apologize for anything, that's not what I'm saying here, but think of the times where someone's apologized to you. The times where it's resonated and felt true and genuine versus the time where it just felt like a superficial, perfunctory, here's what I have to do. If anything, think about some of those influencer apologies on YouTube, right? You can tell when something feels right. So when the things that you're putting on paper feel right for you, you're heading in the right direction. One of my panelists last night said, authenticity is a journey. And there's nothing truer than that. For some folks, on one part of the journey, maybe you don't have the language for stuff yet. That's okay. For others who might be really keyed in on the introspection, go ahead, lean into that. I have no preconceived notions, expectations of where you might be on that journey. As long as you're speaking your truth, you're doing the right thing. And so, moment of peace, moment of calmness, fill the space with who you are. Okay. On that note, if it's important to you, it's important to us. Rather than thinking about what does Wil want to know about me, turn that around and say, what do I want Wil to know about me? Right? Take ownership of your story. And if you have any questions like, how far do I go? How much detail? Is this something I should put in the application? Come back to this philosophy. It'll be a great marker to help you identify, okay, have I been able to convey enough context, detail that I feel Wil knows a little bit more about who I am. And I keep using myself as the kind of endpoint of this, because sometimes it's easier to write for somebody, or knowing that you're maybe writing a letter to somebody, right? Things flow a little bit more than feeling like you are submitting an application that goes off into the ether. There is a human at the end of it. And hopefully kind of in that process, it makes it a little bit more real. And then connecting the dots or don't. I think another kind of notion, mystery, rumor that gets out there is that you have to have a straight through line from where you've been, what you've done, into what you want to do next. That there's some clear connectivity to why business school and what your short-term and long-term goals are, and that you know exactly what you're going to do. For some of you, that might be true. Cool. But for the vast majority of us out there, it couldn't be further from the truth, and that's okay. If anything, it probably looks a little bit more like this, right? From how you were raised to the things that you've done. Looking backwards, there might be some more of that clarity. You're better able to connect the dots now that you have some of that kind of long range, hindsight is 2020 kind of perspective. In the GSB application process, there's three paradigms of thinking. There's the retrospective, thinking about what you've done, how you've done it, why, being able to unpack some of those experiences. There's the introspective part, right? What matters most to you and why. And then there's a prospective piece of it. What do you want to do next, right? And notice in the GSB application, we don't ask you for your long-term, short-term goals. Rather, we ask you, what are your aspirations? Work backwards from there. I think as you look forward, nobody can predict the future. And so I fully understand that, there is going to be some exploration once you're at business school. So unless that is something that speaks to you, don't feel like you have to put it in there. Kind of assume it's going to happen, whether you like it or not, actually. But why business school for you? I'm not judging your rationale. I'm also not judging how nuanced it is, fully recognizing that for some folks, you might not have a lot of connections to the school or the ability to attend events, whether it's geography, scheduling, timing, cost. Those are things that I will never hold against you. Rather, think about it as an opportunity to understand why business school is the right choice for you, and hopefully that also alleviates some of those expectations that we might kind of unduly put on ourselves. Okay, and this is your story. Tell it how you want to. One thing that I also want to name is that the last thing I want any one of you to do is feeling like you have to commodify or cheapen or sell some experience you might have had, an identity, things that you're interested in. Rather than thinking, here's the thing that gets me in, or here's that marker and centering that, reframe that to, given this identity or this experience, maybe it's an industry, how does that shape who you are, right? In helping us understand that piece, that's the big so what. So if you're at that kind of writer's block place, maybe your papers or your piece is too long, go back and think, so what? Am I learning more about this experience than I am about myself, or who I am because of it? If that's the case, go back to the drawing board. Only share the details that feel right for you and that you're comfortable sharing. Kind of big picture, this is a confidential space. No one sees your application except you, whoever you decide to share it with, and whoever's reading it on our team. We're not sharing, your interviewer will not see your application, they will not see your essays, future students, faculty members, nobody else will see them. So if you do decide to share some things that are personal, please feel free to. On that note, there's another piece of advice out there that drives me crazy. It's the one that says, and this is one I hear admission officers say all the time, it's, if you printed this out at your office, that you would run back at midnight to snatch it off because you don't want anybody to read that. I feel that's a little misguided because it presupposes that you have to have something that you're ashamed of, or 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 that is deeply like more like whatever. There's a lot of charged feelings to that. I do a subtle shift. Write about something that you have a connection to. If you have a feeling associated with whatever you're writing, you're headed in the right direction. There might be something deeply personal and vulnerable that you don't want other people to know just yet, because maybe you're not in that part of your life. Totally okay. On the other end of the spectrum, maybe it's something you love. And the things that drive and motivate you are things that you share very openly in your day-to-day life. That's okay too. So I just want to normalize the fact that you do not have to have severe trauma or tragedy or obstacles to be able to understand who you are and convey that in a manner that's compelling, because everybody has something to learn from everybody else. So I just wanted to put that out there because I think it's important for us to think big picture and not compare to other people's experiences. This is not any type of Olympics by any means, but rather kind of an opportunity to delve deeper into who we are. All right, so what are the prompts? So we have 2 required essays, and then there's some optional, and I mean optional. You do not need to use them if you don't feel it's necessary. So what matters most to you and why Stanford? We'll start with those 2. So I actually have a lot of content on this already. In sharing your story part 2, this is something you can search online, jump into YouTube to find it. But there are a number of different exercises where I'm pushing you to think not just about the topic, but also kind of what was the experience around the topic. So thinking about the process beyond just the outcome. Here's a kind of framework that I use there, kind of using the what matters most to you and why kind of prompt. We lower the stakes and say, what matters to you in this moment? Go through an exercise and write through it. And then from there, ask ourselves some follow-up questions about the experience. And I think in processing the how and taking some of that meta approach to it, it might help you identify some new themes, kind of opportunities, ways of working, ways of thinking that could come in handy beyond just the application process. I also do have a specific what matters most to you and why workshop that delves deeply into this kind of one piece specifically. And it's not the most flattering of screenshots, but thank God it's this one and not that one, which is the one that popped up for me at one point. So you don't need to see that, rather some of the high level takeaways here. One is personal to personal. Come back to that question of so what? What is it that I am trying to convey about myself, given this anecdote? Use kind of common sense as well. You don't necessarily need to get into the gritty detail about it, but provide enough information around it so that I know what's happening, okay? If in doubt, talk to some folks around you, write it, put it down, give it some time, come back to it and see how you feel. Again, it's more about the so what than it is about the what. Notice that it says what matters most to you and why, question mark. There's no in business or in whatever. So it does not have to be career or business related if that's not what matters to you. Sometimes how you're speaking about it has no relation to the other things in your life, and that's totally okay. You might be using the application as kind of one cohesive piece. You could also be using the parts of the application as distinct pieces, different chapters even, to tell at the still the story of who you are, right? Chapter book versus single volume. Do the 2 questions have to be connected? So this is the what matters most to you and why Stanford? And the answer is no. If they do connect, you can use them to kind of bounce off of each other. And as I just mentioned, if they're completely separate, totally okay as well. We do have a recommended word count. You don't have to stick to like, here's how many words for prompt A and prompt B. Overall though, please stick to the word count as much as possible. You'd be surprised at how, with a little bit of a critical eye, you would be able to convey a lot in a few words. We've also kind of identified over time, some areas, and honestly, more is not always more. And one of the challenges of a leader is how do you convey something kind of succinctly, clearly, and to use the phrase that one of my panelists used pretty recently, clarity is kindness. If you're clear and make it obvious for the admissions reader, the less time you have to be wondering about where we're going. What are you trying to say? What does this mean, right? You're the one who's doing the exploration. So bring me on that journey with you. And then thoughts on writing style. Use phrases that are natural to you. So if anything, start practicing now. It doesn't have to be with application prompts, right? Because if it has a lot of stakes attached to it, sometimes that's where we kind of get in our heads. So if there's any journaling that you do, if there's an app, or you can even purchase like little journals that have daily prompts, start practicing getting words onto the paper. What are things and phrases that feel natural and feel like how you speak and write and communicate? Maybe you're not a writer. That's okay. Don't bang your head on the wall because once you sit down in front of a computer, you get writer's block. If you are kind of an oral kind of processor, speak into, like, record yourself, then take notes, or like record yourself on Zoom and have the transcription do the work, right? So think about the different tools that help you be most effective. You don't have, not everybody has to be sitting and typing. Maybe you're talking and jotting notes and then putting them together later. Maybe you're storyboarding and putting Post-its up on kind of a wall to help you identify the themes of your life. Maybe you're drawing a graph, and this is something that someone shared pretty recently, so I can't claim credit for it, but graphing out your life, what are some of the high points? What are some of the low points? What drove those, and kind of what kind of stories does that shape and tell about who you are? So many different prompts to help you start to develop some of that self-awareness of not just who you are, but why you are. So I am not expecting everything to be beautiful prose or poetic. Sometimes your writing style is straight and to the point, totally okay. If it's reflective of you and kind of how you communicate, that's the right thing to do. All right, so a little bit on the why Stanford. So this is actually a screen grab of our information session, and it's right at the beginning, but I actually do think these are some of the most important questions you can be asking yourself in this process. So if you could do anything, if you didn't have to worry about salary, if you didn't have to worry about student debt, if you didn't have to worry about what other people thought about you, or you didn't have to worry whether or not you were qualified to do something. If you could do anything, what would it be? Right? Work backwards from there. In order to get there, right? Thinking about some of these dotted and dashed lines to that future you, how will a business degree help you get there? What are some of the experience, whatever? And especially in the context of here, how will a Stanford degree help you get there? Maybe it's courses, maybe it's the network, maybe it's the ethos, philosophy, community, whatever that means. As long as you're connecting that back to who you are and what you want to get out of this experience and do beyond, you're headed in the right direction. Again, I have no preference what your rationale is, how you're rationalizing it. The only person you need to convince is yourself, because honestly, like 3/4 of you will change something at Stanford. I will never hold you to account for what you wrote in your essay. You might discover something totally new. You might be creating something totally new. And that's awesome. Okay, so the optional short questions. So there's two here. So one is, we know that each person is more than a list of facts or predefined categories. I see my typo there, so please excuse, these were late slide decks. We're all human. Please feel free to elaborate on how your background or life experiences have helped shape your recent actions or choices. The next set of optional questions, and you can input up to 3 responses to this one. Think about times you've created a positive impact, whether in professional, extracurricular, academic, or other settings. What was your impact? What made it significant to others? Notice that the prompts are helping guide you towards the type of details that are going to be helpful in each of these questions. Growing up, I actually didn't think a lot about who I was. That's not something that was normal at my home culturally, and I'm assuming that it might be similar for some of you out there. So I wanted to provide something that might be helpful here. You don't have to use this framework at all, but something that I found very helpful as I've tried to understand who I am and how I move through space is this question: who are you? Okay, we each have identities that we hold, whether they're visible, I'm bald, maybe they're invisible. There's combinations of identity. Think intersectionality, and this is stemming from the work, the Black feminist theory, Kimberly Crenshaw, among others. Intersectionality, right? How do these layers influence kind of our position relative to the world around us? What are the interests you hold? How are the things that excite you? What are your lived experiences? All of these pieces contribute to who each and every one of you are. The question I often get is, for a consultant, spin that around. Being a consultant shapes me in this way or influence how I move through the world, right? We are moving from centering any single identity to centering you and understanding how any of these markers contribute to who you are. So to put this into a little bit more of a tactical and practical framework, tell me about a time when, right? So maybe how does an identity, start with the identity piece, right? So Filipino American, how does that combine with other layers of who you might be? How does that shape some of the interests you have? And then how does that move on to some of your lived experiences? So for me, Filipino American, parents immigrated from the Philippines. I always thought I was a STEM nerd, right? I love sciences. But then one day, I was in a PhD program for 5 years, and then I realized one day I was more excited getting other people excited about sciences than I was about my own research. And I realized that I needed a pivot, right? Purely by chance, I found the world of admissions. But because of what I've been able to experience in admissions, interacting with you all, it's inspired me to continue learning about like humanity, lived experience, leadership. And now I've overcome the trauma of or grappling with the trauma of my first grad school experience to have earned and currently in another graduate program. Right? So that's a little bit of my journey to frame it as an example. And then you can also do this backwards, right? There's a conversation I had with so-and-so. It was shaped because of this. Some of the ways that I move through the world inform how I engage with that interest. And that comes from here, right? So there's no one right or wrong way to engage with any of these, but here's one framework that if you don't know where to start, might be able to help get you going in that process. All right, so, and then coming back to this final piece about impact. A note about impact. There might have been an influence on a single person's life, or you might have done something where you've engaged and it influences and touches hundreds of people, thousands of people. Both are different types of impact. I have no preference for one over the other. If anything, how do you define impact? What are these changes that you made in the world around you, right? Whether it's big, whether it's small, no preference for scope, scale. If anything, think about the things that you're proud of, right? And then think about the so what. The so what, if anything, can help you articulate what that impact is. I wanted to just point that out and again, deconstruct how we think about impact because oftentimes we're anchoring on the stories we hear, anchoring on the things people tell us, which might not tell the full picture of it. And I don't want anybody out there to feel like, okay, because I haven't done what this other person did, I'm any less competitive of a candidate. So come back to the things that you've done and ask, okay, given that, what's the so what? Fully acknowledging that sometimes you have taken actions. Here are the leadership competencies. Things might still be in process, right? We're all works in process. Sometimes the projects, the outcomes you won't see until a little bit later on. Or you might not actually see the impact of your work until you're in grad school. Totally okay. If anything, bring me back to some of those competencies, those experiences, the things that you did, right? Impact, so what? Okay, a few final words here, and then I'm gonna jump into the Q&A box. So thank you for the team who's been helping triage and answer some of the questions that are there. But definitely I'll be preserving some time to connect and continue building out and elaborating on some of the things we shared here. So one more time, speak your truth. That is how you get to that quote unquote authentic place. As long as it's a good reflection of you, that's okay. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not looking for anything in particular other than trying to understand and get to know who you are. On feedback, if you're comfortable, definitely have someone you trust read it. Maybe, and notice I say someone you trust, not necessarily someone super close to you, because sometimes you're writing about things that maybe you don't want them to know, but having someone as a trusted proofreader might be able to help kind of move you forward. And that could be anybody in your life. That said, and I will take full ownership of it. I am someone who, when I submitted my grad school app, and don't tell them this, but at one point I was like, oh, this one doesn't feel right. So I just jammed out a copy and then submitted it without getting any feedback on it or editing. So you also don't have to involve anybody in the process if you don't want to. Totally okay as well. That said, incorporate feedback, edit, adjust, as long as it's your words, that's what matters, as long as you're the one putting in the work. Again, you don't want to kind of preclude or kind of stop yourself from getting full advantage of these opportunities for introspection, understanding your journey, and really embracing some of the things that make you who you are, and ultimately like the strengths that you bring to the table. And so that's that piece there. And I'll extend this to even think about things like ChatGPT and AI. You're still gonna have to tell your story. No chatbot or artificial intelligence piece can elaborate and bring me to the details of the things that you've done. So if anything, think about it as a tool. Again, this is not kind of what Stanford is saying you should or should not do, but you want to make sure that this work is yours. There is a beauty into the preparation and that understanding. And if anything, the preparation of, okay, tell me about a timeline. What happened then? Those are the exact same things that you're going to be talking about in the GSB interview process. So might as well use the application as a chance to also prep for that at the same time. So, okay. Writer's block. And this is real. I know for folks who might not do a lot of writing, folks who might, I had somebody that just the other day say, I am an engineer. I don't have the opportunity to practice writing a lot. So I get stuck. That's okay. Lower the stakes. Instead of like forcing what matters most to you and why, maybe think, okay, what matters to me today? And use that as a starting point. Step back, put it down. Maybe you are great thinking while you walk, find a different location, mix it up. Sometimes that can help as well. Find what works for you. Maybe you're an early bird. Carve out some time then. Maybe you need a cup of coffee or two or four. Whatever it is, kind of lean into those spaces. Maybe you're a person who likes to plan way ahead, plot that out, do it. Maybe you need that pressure of time, that deadline ahead of you to be able to put out something meaningful. You know yourself best. Just step into it, eyes wide open. The last thing I want is for you to have additional stress because time creeps up on you. And if in doubt, tell me about a time when. Start there, right? Give me some of those details. You are already the expert in you. You can just think back, okay, what are the circumstances? Who else was involved? Where did that idea come from, right? And those are things that you can pull out. And then from there, start to kind of build on and unpack and analyze and reflect on. So, start with something concrete that you can wrap your hands around, wrap your mind around, and then feel free to explore and go from there. So a couple of different ways to approach this. Again, no one way is more or less valuable than the other, because we all learn differently, we all communicate differently, and don't feel like you have to do the same thing that anybody else did. It worked for them, it might not for you, and vice versa. Okay, final thoughts. You got this. In this process, you're gonna have a lot of feelings, right? The feelings might be stress, it might be excitement, it might be joy. Notice those. When are you most effective? When you feel stuck, okay, notice that. So, hopefully you might be able to catch that sooner and sooner so you don't start to spiral, or be able to course correct. If it's a moment of joy, what caused it? Maybe that's something to continue to unpack and feel out further. If it's something you're not ready to continue exploring, stop. The last thing I want anybody out there to do is have to kind of revisit any experiences or re-traumatize yourself because anybody says that you have to or you should or whatever. Again, you are the owner of your own story. Every lived experience is powerful, has value, and has meaning. I don't ever want you to detract from that. But I also, again, as I mentioned earlier, don't want you to feel like you have to commodify or convey something you're not ready for or that you don't want to. Okay. Start practicing identifying and articulating the things that you need, whether it's in this application process, identifying questions that you might be able to ask or search for, because there's a lot of really great content on our websites or on our YouTube channel. Articulating the types of questions with more nuance and connect it to the things that you care about when you're interacting with students or alumni, right? Because those are all skills that you're going to be using during grad school, including, I need a little bit of support. Okay, what does support mean? What does that look like for you? These are all skill sets that, yes, can help you through this application process, but can also be useful and will become critical toolkits for you both in grad school and beyond. And then understand kind of what that timeline looks for you. Some of you might be working, some of you might have other obligations, maybe family, maybe children. Kind of recognize all of those and plan accordingly. I already mentioned that every journey is valid and has value. Celebrate that, embrace that. I know for some folks out there, and kind of speaking for myself, I wasn't asked to reflect or think about myself that much growing up. It was always, do this, keep your head down, here's the way to do it, always doing things in service of others. So it might feel a little uncomfortable speaking and drawing attention to yourself or talking about the things that you've done. This is one of those times that acknowledge that, own that, and share these, and then start to think, okay, I'm conveying exactly what they're asking for. Here's what happened. I'm conveying fact, right? These small nudges and movements in the way we think and approach things might be able to help you articulate and embrace and be proud of the things that you've done. Because at the end of the day, I really do hope each and every one of you is proud of the things that you've done, accomplished, achieved, and will continue to achieve in the future. When I read your application, you are the most interesting person in the world to me. Thank you for putting yourself out there. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing these moments of your life with us. You have this. You got this. You can do it. And kind of in the spirit of leaving you with something a little bit on the brighter side, this is Helen. Helen believes in you. You got this. So I am going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn the tables over to the Q&A. Please remember that upvote is totally an option, and that's where we're going to focus our interactions right now. So in the essays, so thank you, Derek. In the essays, is it better to focus on one or two pivotal moments in a career that defines this, or look more holistically at our entire journey to highlight ongoing themes? With only 600 to 700 words, it's hard to fit it all in. Great question. Take a look at the different essay prompts, because depending on what you want to convey, there might be different ways to do it. So let's say one or two, both pivotal things are important to influencing and informing who you are and kind of why things are important to you, for sure you can put them there. Maybe they're two discrete things, and maybe you want to communicate them in separate impact questions, right? So again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. If it's important to you, it's important to us. So you'd be surprised at how much you can actually convey within the breadth of the application. Extend this to things like the resume and work history. If there are moments there, those can be places to at least start the conversation, provide more details elsewhere, because you can continue to expand on a bullet point in your resume, potentially in the impact questions. Maybe there's an element of your background or lived experience that helps inform that, right? So again, thinking about these different spaces as different opportunities and lenses to communicate, you might be surprised. All right, so thank you for that one, Derek. And again, I have no preference one way or the other how you want to approach this. Okay, some questions here. Please elaborate on the background question. Are we supposed to say how our background affected a recent choice or past choice? Or should we talk about how, for example, we lived a specific experience given our past experiences? So Amelia, the answer is actually, it's up to you, right? I don't have, again, any preconceived notion of how to approach or engage with this question, because each and every one of you has a different lived experience. So what works for one of you might not for the other, and vice versa. If any, and this is going to sound weird, don't overthink it. Don't feel the need to over strategize. If anything, tell me about a time when, right? If it's important, kind of convey that. You can see where you can indicate where, if you work during college, is there a specific part where we can elaborate more on this? Should we use the additional information part to do this? Ask yourself, so what? What am I trying to convey? Okay, and then given that detail, is it an impact that you had? Okay, maybe that's the spot. Maybe there's something about that work that informs what matters most and why, then that's the spot. So come back to that question of so what, and that'll point you into the right direction. If there's something specific about it that you're not able to kind of convey, so maybe you like additional information can be an opportunity, but that's also not somewhere to use as spillover. Use that as additional context to help me understand like what's going on in your life. So again, come back to that so what question. And would you suggest mentioning a paper publication in the awards section? Great question. You can put that, as long as you're conveying it, if that's something you're proud of, something you've been a part of, convey it somewhere. And this is one where I will say if there's a citation, it can be helpful because, and I'm saying this as someone formerly from STEM, that, you know, impact factor, kind of what number author you are, all of those have some kind of signifiers. So, you know, if that citation is possible, great. If not, don't worry about it. We will kind of convey what is most important to you. And if you're not 100% sure of the specifics regarding the number of individuals competing for a specific award and also all the selection criteria, do the best that you can. We don't expect you to know the full inner workings of some of those things. This is more to help us get a little bit of context around what that is, because the STAR Award could mean very different things. It might be a company award, it might be a national award. So just help us understand some of that context. That's where the backbone of those questions come from. Great question from Pradeep. Will the interviewer read the essays? How much time does the admission committee take to read the essays and the complete profile? So your interviewers will not see your application at all. They are trained alumni, and the only thing they see is your resume, right? So use that as a blank slate. It's a conversational kind of opportunity to talk more about some of these things that are important to you. In terms of how much time do I spend on the application, it depends. Some applications read really quickly and either they're very clear and succinct writers. Conversely, there's times where people have left a lot of blank open spaces. And as long as you're making a conscious decision to leave that open versus just kind of throwing away that opportunity, cool. But if there's less to read, it goes faster. And then have been times where something's really complex. I've spent 30, 45 minutes, and I still don't feel like I'm getting what's important, I'll put it down, step away, do something, come back with fresh eyes at another time to make sure that I really understand what's happening here. That's kind of the beauty and the value of the holistic review process. All of these pieces come into play. So anything that you can do to help provide some of that clarity, that's where the additional information piece comes into play. Like if there's anything quirky about timelines, nuances to like maybe health crises that impacted your transcripts, stuff like that can be helpful there. But otherwise, I'm reading to understand, not to deny or anything like that. Since there is a separate section for awards and achievements, do we need to remove that typical section from your CV or resume? I'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow, but it's up to you. You can leave it in there because, again, your interviewer will see your resume, but up to you there. All right, so 12:49. Thank you so much. Oh, and the last question here, if you're applying through the consortium, will the questions be the same? The answer is yes. All of the questions that we're going to ask you, whether you're applying through our main application or through the consortium application, will be the same. So if you want, go to our website and we have all of these questions posted there on our website. For those out there, the consortium is a nonprofit organization dedicated to closing the severe underrepresentation of Black, Hispanic, and Native Americans in business and business leadership. You do not need to identify with any of these identities to become a member. It's more about a demonstrated commitment to their mission statement. There are a few requirements. One is that you hold a bachelor's degree or its equivalent, and that you are a US citizen or permanent resident. It is an alternate application platform. It does have slightly different timelines, but kind of big picture, the early round will incorporate with our round 1, and their regular round will incorporate into our round 2. We are asking the same questions of all of our applicants, regardless of how their application is getting to us. It's the same assessment. And so really thinking about equity for all, like fairness, that is the philosophy that underpins all of this. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But thank you again for joining. Definitely check out the other resources that we have in case you want to do a little bit more guided exploration on either the what matters most question or some of the other pieces out there. So thank you again. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll be able to see you again soon. From myself, my team, and Helen, you got this.